Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're making an Italian Easter bread called Gubana. It's made with a sweet and rich dough, filled with dried fruit, toasted nuts and citrus. And besides tasting great, it looks awesome as well. It might look intimidating, but it's super easy to make, I promise. Now look at that texture. It's light and fluffy, it's almost like a brioche. And even if Easter is not a thing in your culture, this is still a great bread to make. So let's get on with it. As always, you'll find a full detailed recipe down in the description box. You can also find links to all the equipment I use. And speaking of equipment, this is what we need. A tray with some non-stick paper, bowl, scales, dough scraper, temperature probe, a brush, a rolling pin, and a fine grater for the lemon and orange zest. And a little pot to cook the filling in. Now on to the ingredients. For the dough, you'll need some strong white bread flour, milk, a couple of egg yolks, salt, yeast, sugar, some soft butter, the zest of an orange, some vanilla paste, and for glazing, we'll use 1 egg yolk mixed with 1 teaspoon of milk. Now for the filling, you'll need some currants or raisins, some toasted and crushed hazelnuts, some toasted and crushed pine nuts, and some toasted and crushed walnuts, cocoa powder, lemon zest, and some cinnamon. You'll need some sugar, some candied mixed peel, and Madeira, but you can use any sweet red wine. Or if you want to make it non-alcoholic, use some grape juice. So first things first, let's make the filling. In a small pot, combine the wine, the sugar, the lemon zest, the cocoa powder, and the cinnamon, and bring it over to the hob top. And this is very quick and simple. All you want to do is bring it up to a simmer on medium heat, make sure that the sugar is dissolved, and then keep adding ingredients. Add the dry fruit and mixed peel, give it a quick mix, and follow that with the crushed and toasted nuts. Then stir it up and keep cooking for around 2 more minutes. And just keep an eye on it so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. And a note on the toasted and crushed nuts. What I did is get some whole nuts. I just toasted them in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius until they're nice and brown, and then I crushed them in a mortar and pestle, but you could also chop them up using a knife, or use a food processor. Now leave the filling on the side to cool down. Let's start making our dough. I want to use cold milk because when kneading this by hand, it will warm up. And to learn more about dough temperature control, click the link in top right corner. But let's get on with this dough. To your bowl, add the milk, the yeast, salt, and the sugar. Add the 2 egg yolks. Follow that with the orange zest and the vanilla paste. And now, give it all a good mix. You want to dissolve any large salt and sugar crystals and hydrate the yeast before adding the flour. And once you're happy with that, add the flour, grab your scraper, and mix this to a dough. You want to mix this in the bowl until it's one cohesive piece, and if the scraper's not doing the job, continue on by hand. And once it's come together, pop it out on your table, and we can start kneading. This dough is not very sticky, so I use my regular kneading method. What I like to do is press down and forwards with the heel of my right hand, then using the fingers of my left hand I fold the piece of dough under the heel of my right hand, then turn and repeat. Once you've done this a few times, the motion will become fluent. It will be like second nature. You want to keep kneading this dough for 3 minutes, then stretch it out on the table. Because once we have developed some gluten, we can add the butter. Right, this is going to be messy, but trust me on this. Slap your butter onto the dough and fold it in. What we're trying to do at this point is forcing the butter into the dough. So just pick it up and squish it together. Do this for around 30 seconds and then continue kneading as you were before. And while at the beginning it will be a sticky mess, just keep kneading. It will start coming together. And if it's sticking to the table a little bit, just scrape it up with your scraper and then continue kneading. As you can see, it's already become nice and smooth. You want to keep kneading this dough after adding the butter for around 4 more minutes. And look at that. It's not sticky, it's nice and smooth, and that's how you add butter to a dough. And I also have a full video on this topic if you want to check it out. Now let's clean down the table. Pop your dough into a bowl and take the temperature. 25 to 26 degrees Celsius is just about right for this. Now we'll cover it up and leave it to ferment for an hour and a half. If your dough is warmer, it will ferment more rapidly. If it's cooler, it will take longer. Adjust your proofing times accordingly. But my kitchen is around 22 degrees Celsius and the dough was about 25, so an hour and a half first proof is just about right. Now we need to give this dough a fold. Pop it out on your table, smooth side down, then flatten it out into a large rectangle and fold it up, just the way I'm doing it. Folding benefits the dough in a number of ways. You'll degas it, you'll equalize the temperature throughout the dough, and as you can see we created loads of extra layers in the dough structure, which will make it stronger. So after you've done the fold, pop it back into the bowl for another hour and a half of fermentation. But of course keep an eye on it. Don't take these times for granted. If your dough is puffing up rapidly, cut the fermentation time down. But this looks about right. It's doubled since the time we began. Now quickly double check your filling. If it's quite stiff and difficult to spread, then you can add a little splash of water just to loosen it up. Okay, now we can start working at shaping. Get your dough ball, dust it generously with flour, pop it out on your table, and we can start flattening it out. And we are going to use a rolling pin to roll this out, but what I like to do is always start by hand. Make sure everything's well dusted, and then just using the flat part of your fingers, press the dough out into a general shape, only then continue on with the rolling pin. And you want to roll it into a large rectangle. And if the dough is not stretching, don't force it. Just leave it to sit for 5 minutes, go away, do something else, then come back to it and keep rolling. Now drop the filling out on the dough evenly, and then continue on spreading it out. Use something wide and flat. The dough scraper would work great for this, but I have this spatula, so I'm going to use it. Again, there's no rush, just spread it out nicely, evenly and gently. And make sure to leave an edge at the top. And now we can start rolling. You want to try and roll it nice and tight. You see what I'm doing here? As I'm rolling it, I'm pulling it back. Again, there's no rush, take your time. You want to make it as even as you can. The dough might get a bit narrower towards the end, so just stretch out the sides and keep rolling it. Now wet your hand and brush the dough all over. This will help the dough stick to itself. And now just fold over the loose piece and seal up your loaf. And you can taper the ends a little bit, you don't want them to be too fat. And now this is how you shape it. All you want to do is twist it into kind of a snail shell shape, if you know what I mean. And then take the loose end and tuck it underneath. And make sure not to roll it too tight. You want it to be loose, because it will puff up and grow and spread as it's fermenting and baking. Now place it on a non-stick paper lined tray. We can clean down the table, then cover this loaf up and leave it to ferment. The final proof should take around an hour and a half to 2 hours. You want it to puff up well before baking. And during the final hour of fermentation, preheat your oven 160 degrees Celsius with a fan on, which is 320 Fahrenheit. And of course, if your kitchen is cooler, this may take longer, so just keep an eye on it. But 2 hours did it for this loaf, and you can clearly see how much it has grown. Now grab your egg yolk and milk glaze and brush it all over the loaf. Now let's pop it in the oven. It will take around 15 minutes, and you can turn it around halfway through to give it an even bake. And if you're either unsure of the doneness of your loaf, take its temperature. If the inside reads more than 94 degrees Celsius, it's ready, and that goes for any kind of bread. Well, here we are. That's how we make Gubana, an Italian Easter bread. And as always, if you have any questions or suggestions, write them down in the comments. Let me know what you think. And subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.